Hello, and thank you so much for dropping by this video. And a warm welcome to everyone who's watching the live broadcast of it. So, we're going to talk today about that guy and what he actually taught. Because many things have been added to what he taught, and his real message has been lost. And what I've come to realize is his real message is about what God is, what we are, and how to live. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of those things. And I just want to be really clear, this is not a religion. You don't have to have any specific beliefs. There's no, this is a path, a spiritual path, a way of life that he called us to. And a lot of it's based on the ideas of a man named Bruno Gröning, who said that in essence, he came to remind us what Christ actually taught. So what is the good news? It's written that Christ called his message and teaching the good news. Well, what is that good news? Well, first and foremost, there's this question of what are we? And both some ways directly and some ways indirectly, we have very clear indicators that Christ spoke of us all as children of God. It's from what we have written, it indicated that there was something special about him meaning Jesus, and that we were all children of God. In fact, the very special title that's applied to him, Son of God, you can find it applied to other people in the Bible. But regardless, so first and foremost, Christ came to remind us that we are all precious children of God, as it's written in Genesis, made in the image and likeness of God. But what does that really mean, to be a child of God, to be made in the image and likeness of God? Well, Bruno Gröning really clarified it. He made it very simple. He said that we are a divine creation, a divine marvel, that what we are is actually a miracle and worthy of reverence and awe. Of course, we can contrast this with the idea that human beings are inherently evil or are miserable sinners, and that just completely contradicts, what Christ taught. And so, first of all, part of the good news is what we are. We think of good news as like something to come in the future, and I'll get to that. That's part of the good news. But the good news is here and now, and the good news is within us, and the good news is what we are, that we're literally, as Bruno Gröning said, that we were created out of love, out of an act of love, we were, and I'm not talking about these physical bodies, I'm talking about our immortal soul, that we're literally an extension or a creation of love. So, it's written that Christ spoke of this thing called the living waters, but there are not very many references to it. And Bruno Gröning clarified exactly what that is. It's a divine energy, a force, a power that God is always sending forth, and that we can very easily take into ourselves. And here's how to do it. Please sit with your legs uncrossed, feet flat on the floor, hands on your legs, palms facing upwards, back in an upright position, neither slouched nor stiff. And that's the physical preparation. And then please close your eyes and now be open to the idea that there is a divine power that we can access. And now hand over either to God, your understanding of God or a higher power, or a spiritual helper such as Jesus, such as Bruno, that you trust. handing over fear and worry and resentment, and trusting any particular situations. Anything we're stressed about, handing that stress over and then handing over the situation to the divine. And now focus your entire attention on your healing. That there is this power that can heal, that can do all things. And then ask to receive that power and observe your body. Literally having the intention to absorb that power, to take it in. Noticing what you're feeling, trusting that these sensations now are your body healing, your body being rejuvenated and reorganized by this divine force. We'll spend a little time in silence. I'll offer some reminders. Noticing what you feel. Intending to take this energy in, this divine force, trusting, believing that every sensation now is a part of your body coming back into divine order, into health. So please, to anyone who's new, please continue this practice. I'm going to talk and read a little bit. Please continue to observe your body, taking in this energy. Carolyn, welcome. I think this is your first time saying hello, so a warm welcome to this channel. And thanks for saying hi. So, it's written that Christ called his teaching the good news. We've looked at part of the good news about us, that we're a divine creation, that we're children of God. Bruno Gröning clarified that even if someone does evil, their soul remains pure. The way that that happens is that through misuse of free will, people take on evil into their body, and then that directs them, but it doesn't taint their soul. That our soul has divine protection. And so, what's the good news about God then? What is God? That word gets used so often and to mean so many things. Bruno Gröning clarified very simply that God is goodness. God is love. God is, he used a German word, Leben, which means existence, life, the animating life force, beingness. So each person needs to meditate on that word to come to an understanding of what Bruno Green meant by it. But they all point to a profound, something profound and underlying. He said, God is harmony. And he pointed out that God never punishes, but that God does allow certain things to happen to serve as a lesson, but never as a punishment. Also, Bruno Gröning clarified that God is everywhere and in everything. This is very good news because many people feel disconnected from God. We have this idea that God is far away, whereas God is actually closer than close and actually lives within us and lives within everything. So it's okay to go to church to feel connected to God, but we can also feel connected to God everywhere because God is everywhere. So let's just put aside temporarily all old ideas of God and try on these new ones, that God doesn't punish, that God is goodness, that God is omnipresent everywhere and omnibenevolent, all good, only good, and omnipotent, all powerful, able to do all things, and available to help us here on our life's journey. Don't take my word, Bruno's word, or even the written account we have of Jesus' word. We need to know for ourselves. So let's spend a little more time in silence reflecting on these things, continuing to observe our bodies, either putting aside or handing over old ideas of God. Every sensation, the energy of God healing and reorganizing our bodies now. So, why is all this good news about God? Well, first of all, that God isn't something we have to be afraid of. Many people, are afraid of God because of the things they've been taught wrongly by people who were taught wrongly, by people who were taught wrongly. It's kind of like there's kind of this rumors and gossip going around about God, and it just keeps getting passed down from generation to generation. And that God is utterly and completely reliable and trustworthy. And this is perhaps the best news, that because as human beings, in essence, there's nothing here on this earth that's completely dependable. Other people will fall short. These bodies are not going to last forever. There's really nothing that's 100% dependable here on this earth. But there is something that is, and that is God. But to really trust in God, we have to let go of our old ideas. And we need to have a spiritual understanding. To be able to trust in God, I needed to have a spiritual understanding of how life operates. Because I didn't trust God because of so many bad things that had happened to me in my life. However, once I had an understanding of, in essence, what Bruno Gröning called the rules of the game of life, then I could see that God was actually completely dependable. For example, the current world health situation. I just have a very simple spiritual view of it, which is that human beings have stepped away from nature. They're out of harmony with nature, and this is just a natural consequence of that. And also, human beings have stepped away from God. And so when we do that, as me as an individual, but us all together, when human beings do that, bad things happen. And it's possible to fixate on the specific bad thing, but I don't find that particularly helpful because any bad thing is just a consequence of stepping away from God. Yes, what's happening right now in April 2020 is certainly quite a large consequence, but I don't see it anything other than what happens when human beings try and live independently of God and not respecting nature. And here's where this understanding of, it's where this is one of the biggest blocks to faith, is why bad things happen to individuals and in the world. And Bruno Gröning was quite clear that God never punishes, but does allow hardships to occur if they serve as a lesson, if they're part of a reparation, meaning a repayment for past things that we've done wrong in the past. And Bruno Gröning spoke of it like this. Take me 1 minute to find it, 1 second. He said, and this is from the book Powers of the Spirit, page 147. He said, human beings have received from God as a gift their inviolable free will to either stand by good or evil. Even if they make life hell through their lack of understanding, greed, and vengefulness towards one another, and even threaten or annihilate the bodies of other people, this still remains at the level of guilt and retribution in the destiny they make for themselves. That is, everyone must, for as long as they do not walk on the path of nonviolence, experience and carry to term in their own bodies everything they have caused or done to other people by way of evil. Short version, you reap what you sow. Every negative thing that happens to us is a consequence of something bad we've done in the past. It's not a punishment. It's, they say in physics, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I think it's a brilliant expression of the spiritual truth, which in many cultures is called karma. Bruno Gröning often speaks of it as guilt or like a price, that our actions have consequences and negative actions have a cost tag connected with them. And so from this place, it's possible to truly trust in God. Without this, I couldn't. Without understanding, well, why do negative things happen? Like I could intellectually say, well, sure, God is goodness, all goodness, yes, but um, without this spiritual understanding of why do negative things happen, I actually couldn't trust in God. But now I do. And now there's the sense that life is a school for me to learn. And part of that, how that learning happens is um, I get back what I put out. As it's written, Christ said, I reap what I sow. So please take some time and really reflect on this. Let's drop into silence and take in this good energy, observing the body, drinking in this divine healing energy, and asking, is this true? Is it true not only that every negative thing that's happened to me is a consequence of bad I've done, but simultaneously, it's also an opportunity to learn and grow? This allows us to step out of victimhood because many people feel like I know I felt like a victim, like all these when bad things happened to me and I didn't understand why, I just felt like a victim. Or I felt that somehow God was punishing me, which is a scary idea to think of infinite love and power is somehow punishing me. Very scary idea and makes it very hard to trust in God. Hmm. So, what is the good news that Jesus came to share and that Bruno Gröning came to remind us of? That each one of us is a child of God, a divine creation. That God is all good and only good and gives us free will. And by free will, we can do very, very horrible things to ourselves and to other people. But we can't harm our soul. We can't taint the soul. The soul can be grasped and led on quite a painful, and I speak from personal experience, excruciating journey. But God is trustworthy and reliable. And Bruno Gröning said, the good will prevail. He spoke of how paradise will actually be restored on this earth, meaning an ending of all suffering, all sorrow, that all evil will be removed. And when he spoke of a soul being lost, he never spoke of a soul being lost forever. One time he said that a soul can be lost for some time. So it's my utter conviction that everyone and everything will be saved or redeemed or brought back into right relationship with God. And this is what early Christians believed. In the first 400 years of Christianity, it was a majority belief, the belief in they called it the universal reconciliation of all beings, of all things, that every soul would be saved. Of course, they were speaking more of in a religious sense. In a spiritual sense, saved means being freed from all evil and united with God. But regardless, it's just a fact of history that that's what early Christians believed. Why did they believe it? Because they learned it from the apostles, those who studied directly with Jesus. Why did the apostles preach that? Because I'm utterly convinced that's the good news that Christ came to share, that God is all reliable and that everyone and everything will be ultimately redeemed. And here's something that Bruno Gröning had to say on that topic. Here, as everywhere, I assist each person with help and advice in all areas. And if you want to help, it would lead to the goal much more quickly. That's my understanding of what Bruno Gröning meant by the goal. He would sometimes call it the great divine work. It would lead to the goal much more quickly, and it would be so much easier, and each person would be so much happier than before. So Bruno Gröning said that he's available to help in all areas and that his help will lead to salvation. Not that he'll do it for us, but that he will assist us. And salvation, he defined salvation as freedom from all evil, that the soul no longer has any evil associated with it or connected with it. So, and here he's asking us to help in this task, in this goal, in this what Eltorey called great divine work. How can we help each other? Well, here's what he had to say. The most beautiful and greatest gift one can give to a human being is trust, is faith. No earthly commodity is higher. What I understand that to mean is that for us each individually to find the true faith and then to pass it along is the greatest gift that anyone can give anyone. And he spoke of this as this is what was going to be necessary for there to be peace on earth. He said, up till now, hate and envy, not just among the Germans, but among all nations on the earth was prevalent. This also has to come to an end, but it will only end when everyone has found their way back to the true faith. There will no longer be any hatefulness among them, among the nations on earth, and world peace will be secured that way. So, did Bruno Gröning call us to a specific doctrine or ideology? Yes and no. No, not really, but yes, he did call us to believe in the utter reliability and dependability of the divine. And that the power of God, which is available to help us in every situation. So he didn't so much teach a doctrine as spiritual principles. And I'm utterly convinced that's the exact same thing. Christ didn't come to found a religion. He came to teach us spiritual principles, how to live, to bring us into contact and connection with the divine, to be in communion with that which has all power, all wisdom, and then to lead us moment by moment, day by day, in this path which Bruno Gröning called sanctification, becoming free of all evil and becoming an instrument or servant of God. Early Christians called it theosis, the process of becoming more like God, the process of becoming more and like Christ. And this is my understanding of the good news that Jesus Christ came to share and that Bruno Gröning came to remind us of. Bruno Gröning said, if people had gotten the message 2,000 years ago, I wouldn't have needed to come. So thank you. Thanks, Magic Song. I will field that question in a video. Thank you so much. So all of this to me is extremely good news that we are a divine soul, and that our soul is incorruptible, though it can be seized and grasped and led places, and even forced to do things that we don't really want to do. This is very good news that God is utterly good and all good and completely dependable and never punishes. This is very good news. It helps me, and I hope it helps others, understand one of the most existentially challenging questions of life. Why do bad things happen? Gives a very clear answer, which then allows us to the other very good news that there is something that is dependable and reliable. 100% reliable, 100% trustworthy. I heard it recently, God called the great reality. That there is something 100% good and trustworthy. And this is very good news that Jesus spoke of being available to help us on our path. It's written, and Bruno Gröning very clearly clarified what a true spiritual helper can and can't do. They can't do the path for us. They can't save us, but they can help us and lead us to salvation. And the exceptionally, possibly the best news ever, that the good will prevail. It's exactly what Bruno Gröning said. The good will prevail. And here I draw on early Christian doctrine that what that means is that every soul will be saved. That's the good news, and that paradise will be restored on earth, and that we can be a part of it, and that we're on this unspeakably amazing journey, which the early Christians called theosis, becoming, evolving, growing to be more like God, more like Christ. In most churches today, that's blasphemy to say. But early Christians, and of course, there's even evidence in the Bible that that's exactly what Christ taught. So, as far as I'm concerned, all of that is absolutely exceptional good news and worthy of celebrating. And to boot, that we have beings such as Christ and Bruno to help us along on this path. This is all very celebration worthy. And lastly, so on top of all of that, Bruno Gröning spoke of, many Christians speak of Christ taking on all sin, and that this is the good news. I think that's close. Based on the teachings of Bruno Gröning, it's very close, but not quite. And here's what Bruno Gröning had to say about it. Okay, every human being who is what everything that human beings have recognized as truth, they can also put into practice if they really want to. If they do that, that is right, and they will receive God's blessing. But if a person or group of people are traveling on the wrong path or have traveled it and they want to turn around because they have now convinced themselves of the truth, they must then, in accordance with the law of cause and effect, first of all go back to the place from which they left the right path, the divine one. So, if, for example, as a result of the lures and seduction of the evil side, someone has believed in or done what is not right for 20 years, they must then, despite their present goodwill, go back for just as long a time. And so another 20 years, right back to their former abandoning of the path, so that they can then walk the path for the first time. This then is what the harsh law demands, as long as the effect of spiritual love, which is what makes forgiving and forgetting possible, is not yet active. Through the teachings of Christ, however, which we must all eventually put into practice, the discharge of guilt goes much, much quicker. Yes, if a person really lets go, it can happen in the very next moment. But that is a spiritual healing and always the grace of God. Do you now have some idea of what Christ has really done for human beings and what he means for all of us? Yes, means for all of us. Yes, for this whole world. But those present here cannot grasp this all-encompassing reality. Otherwise, they would not be sitting around with such sad faces and gloomy thoughts. And that was from Powers of the Spirit, page 202. The short version is if we walk down the wrong path for 20 years, according to what he calls the harsh law, which sounds to me a lot like what's called elsewhere, and he calls it the law of cause and effect, which sounds so much like the law of karma spoken of the East. If you do go down the wrong path for 20 years and you want to get on the good path, the harsh law requires that you travel back 20 more hard years just to get back to the good path. Every wrong that you do, you have to experience it back by the harsh law, or the law of cause and effect, the law of reaping what you've sown. However, according to Bruno Gröning, the teachings of Christ allow that debt, that guilt, the natural consequences of our effects of what we've done to be gotten rid of, to be paid off, to be released much, much more quickly. And hence, friends, freedom. In Eastern terms, we can how to overcome the huge debt of negative karma we've acquired. In Western terms, how to overcome all the guilt we've acquired through all the sin, which means nothing more than harmful action. And that it's possible for it all to be gone in one moment of true trust and true surrender. And Bruno Gröning modeled this, that it's possible for a true master to take on some of the karma, the debt, the guilt of the sin of an aspirant, of someone who's seeking. I've experienced this myself, where I've just handed an illness over to Bruno Gröning and it vanished. Many people have experienced this. Now, Bruno Gröning, and I would assume Jesus Christ, isn't willing to take on everything unless we're fully willing to surrender to God. And I can only speak of this theoretically because I haven't perfected surrender. But here he says, yes, if a person really lets go, it can happen in the very next moment. But that is a spiritual healing and always a grace of God. It's something that's well beyond my qualification to really speak about this really letting go and full surrender, because I'm not a master. I can just report the words of Bruno Gröning, whom I consider to be a master. So that was a lot. And that's what I consider to be the good news of Jesus that we were reminded of by Bruno Gröning. So let's spend a little time and take in some of this healing energy, which in my understanding is part of that grace, handing over anything, any negative thoughts we've taken in, any resentments, and then taking in this good energy. If you take away the idea that Christ is the only master who can help, and if you take away the idea that Christ or any other master would be willing to take on all of the guilt of someone, that you just hand it over and then you don't have to do anything. And you add in the idea of reincarnation and the idea of a spiritual journey, an evolutionary journey, the the depth and width as human beings we can't really comprehend. And you keep everything else in Christianity, or just about everything, and take away the idea of the human beings are sinful. That's the teaching of Bruno Gröning. And if you notice, all those things that I just said, okay, let's take those away. All of those things were added on by human beings. The idea that Christ is the only master that can help, there is some, in it, there is some evidence that that wasn't so much an added on doctrine or interpretation. What do I want to say about that? That's a complicated topic. We'll leave that aside. But if you just remove those doctrines, what Bruno Gröning taught is exactly the evidence we have for what Christ taught and what the early Christians believed. And then they even overlap a little more. Bruno Gröning called Christ the Savior of the world. So there's this way in which Bruno Gröning spoke of Christ as having a very special place in the spiritual work of this world. He just didn't say that Christ was the only one who could help. So what Bruno Gröning taught and what early Christians believed is almost exactly in sync. And it's amazing to me. So if it doesn't make you stand up and dance, it isn't good news. And the Christianity I was taught is a horror movie. Absolutely not good news. So that's kind of my criteria in trying to understand what did Jesus speak. That's not to say that there won't be challenge. That's not to say that life is going to be all simple and easy. And if it doesn't, if it doesn't make you sing and dance, it's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining in. Thanks, Magic Song, for your question. I'll field it. Um, well, actually, maybe, yeah, I'll field that one later. Thank you. Bruno had this interesting, he had very few rules, but one of them is during these gatherings such as this, he didn't allow people to ask questions. And I've found it to be helpful. So I'll field that one later. Or he just wouldn't answer them. It's not that he didn't allow, he just wouldn't answer them. And so I'll field that one later. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Take care, and I wish you a glorious morning, afternoon, and evening. Much love.